Hi everyone. I want to cover something that I alluded to in my last video, and that's something that Jimmy Dore says. Now, he says that because now just 6 corporations, as a result of Bill Clinton taking away regulations on the media and how big media companies can get in 1996, we're at the point where 6 corporations own 90% of the media in America. Now, what Jimmy says is because the people at the top of these media organisations have vested interests in the way the government operates, and obviously they lobby the government and get things like net neutrality go their way. What Jimmy says is the media in America have turned from the watchdogs of the establishment, in that they used to report on corruption and report on the truth. Now they're the guard dogs of the establishment. They actually protect the establishment's secrets and lies from ever being coming to the public's attention. Give you an example. When the war in Yemen was going on, and there was a bombs going off in Yemen, in a war that the US is supporting, and when Palestine were under attack from Israelis, and 18 people were just gunned down in cold blood on the Friday before Passover. All the media were talking about in America was Stormy Daniels. Now, that'll give you proof there that something is extremely wrong with the media. But also, what Jimmy says is the media have become the attack dogs of the establishment, in that anybody who is a threat to it, like Bernie Sanders with his democratic socialist ideas, they'll immediately just all attack him and smear him. And I think at one stage the Washington Post ran 17 negative stories about Bernie Sanders in like 24 hours or something like that. It was incredible. But the point I want to make in this video is it's exactly the same over here. Not to the extent our press isn't quite as bad as in America. You can see it more obvious over here, but nevertheless it's pretty much the same. For instance, just 3 organisations, 3 companies own 71% of all the national print media in the UK, and 5 organisations own 81% of all the national print media. Now, we're meant to have a counterbalance against biased media in this country called the BBC. And the way it's funded, for those of you that don't know from America who watch my videos, we pay, it's about £150 or $200 a year. Each household pays that amount to fund the BBC, and that is meant to give us unbiased news and programming, educational programming and entertainment as well. Now, they don't do that. They are biased, and you'll see proof of that, a few examples in this video, no doubt. Now, the way the media have become the attack dogs over here is exactly the same as they do in America, or they did in America with Bernie Sanders in the 2016 primary. And the target over here is quite obviously Jeremy Corbyn. He's a real threat to the establishment, a real threat. You may remember him saying this.
Bankers like Morgan Stanley should not run our country, but they think they do, because the party they fund and protects their interests, the Conservative Party, is in Downing Street. That's why they want to keep the Tories there, because their rigged economy and their tax cuts for the richest work for them. These are the same speculators and gamblers who crashed our economy in 2008. And then we had to bail them out. Labour is a growing movement of well over 500,000 members and a government in waiting that will work for the many. So when they say we're a threat, they're right. We're a threat to a damaging and failed system that's rigged for the few.
Now, I can't remember a time when a politician was attacked like this and he just came out and just went, yeah, you're right. I really can't. And I've got a lot of respect for him for that. Unfortunately, though, he just keeps getting smeared. They just will not quit. It happened during the election last year when it was big news that he was some sort of terrorist sympathiser because he helped bring peace in Northern Ireland. honestly, it really happened for a long, long time, in case you missed it. And I think what happened is people saw straight through it in this country, um, because he closed a 20-point gap and the Conservatives lost their majority. Now, the press obviously haven't learned their lesson, because in the last 6 weeks, the attacks on Jeremy Corbyn have been relentless. And it all started, excuse me, it all started in the middle of February with this guy. Now, he was supposedly some Czech spy during the Soviet years, and he said that Jeremy Corbyn was passing him secrets and making real outlandish claims, which nobody would believe if they had half a brain. But that didn't stop the press and the media in this country, especially the print media, attacking him with a series of about 4 or 5 days worth of front pages like these. Daily Mail there. Corbyn the collaborator, Corbyn and the commie spy, that was the Sun. Time to be open, Comrade Corbyn, that was the Mail again. They're always the worst, the Mail are. Corbyn was Cold War source, that was the Daily Torygraph. And I think the Daily Express fit some attacks of Corbyn in as well, in between front pages about Princess Diana. Um, Now, it was obviously all absolute rubbish. I mean, nobody believed it. But the attacks were relentless for about 4 or 5 days. They kept asking Jeremy Corbyn about it, and eventually he had to come out and give a statement. I'll play it in a minute. It didn't stop with the press, though, and the media. Tory MPs, one of which went too far, but Tory MPs attacked him. Ben Bradley said this on Twitter: Corbyn sold British secrets to communist spies. Now, that's an outright slur. He was threatened with legal action, and he had to make this tweet a few days later. On the 19th of February, I made a defamatory statement about Jeremy Corbyn. I have apologised to Mr. Corbyn, and here is the complete text of my apology. In my opinion, if you do something like that, you're not fit to sit in the Houses of Parliament. That's just my opinion there. I suppose people could argue against that, but I'm not going to even bother, to be honest. Eventually, Corbyn came out and made a statement of it, and here's what he said in the statement.
In the last few days, the Sun, the Mail, the Telegraph, the Express have all gone a little bit James Bond. They've found a former Czechoslovakian spy whose claims are increasingly wild and entirely false. He seems to believe I kept him informed about what Margaret Thatcher had for breakfast, and says he was responsible for either Live Aid or the Mandela concert, or maybe both. It's easy to laugh, but something more serious is happening. Publishing these ridiculous smears that have been refuted by Czech officials shows just how worried the media bosses are by the prospect of a Labour government. They're right to be. Labour will stand up to the powerful and corrupt and take the side of the many, not the few. A free press is essential for democracy, and we don't want to close it down, we want to open it up. At the moment, much of our press isn't very free at all. In fact, it's controlled by billionaire tax exiles who are determined to dodge paying their fair share for our vital public services. The general election showed the media barons are losing their influence, and social media means their bad old habits are becoming less and less relevant. But instead of learning these lessons, they're continuing to resort to lies and smears. Their readers, you, all of us, deserve so much better. Well, we've got news for them. Change is coming.
So he gets called a commie spy for about a week, 10 days, and makes that statement, and the allegations go away, and the newspaper over the next days become wrappers for fish and chips. About a week later, though, this story surfaces, which I've covered extensively on my channel, about the alleged Russian poisoning using something called Novichok of Sergei Skripal, rather. And Theresa May immediately points the finger at Russia without evidence, and says in a speech in the House of Commons that she's going to expel 23 Russian diplomats. Now, in response to that, Jeremy Corbyn makes this speech.
And has the Prime Minister taken the necessary steps under the Chemical Weapons Convention to make a formal request for evidence from the Russian government under Article 9.2? How has she responded to the Russian government's request for a sample of the agent used in the Salisbury attack to run its own tests? Has high-resolution trace analysis been run on a sample of the nerve agent, and has that revealed any evidence as to the location of its production or the identity of its perpetrators?
So, Corbyn there comes out with a measured approach, asking for proof, because many people with a brain in their head at the time were thinking, hold on a minute, this is an agent of Russia, or rather an agent of Britain, who came over from Russia in a spy swap deal, and there's never been an assassination of a somebody involved in a spy swap deal before with Russia. He's been living over here for 8 years in the open under his own name. His daughter travels regularly between Russia and the UK for 8 years. He's not said anything about Russia or done anything badly towards Russia, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, a week before the Russian election and 100 days before the largest sporting event on the planet is held in Russia, not only does Putin give an order for the assassination of this guy, but also they do it in a way where the finger can be pointed directly at Russia, because they use something that first of all sounds Russian, Novichok, that we know was developed in the Soviet Union. And not only that, does it in such a way that doesn't kill them. And as we know, a nerve agent, you're pretty much going to be dead within 15 minutes of touching it. There's no such thing as a delayed reaction nerve agent, whereas the Skripals had time to go to the pub, go for a walk, then go to a restaurant, have something to eat, drive the car, and then somehow collapse on a park bench. Anybody with half a brain was saying, hold on a minute, this sounds iffy. No, not the government. The government's saying, no, we've got to do this. This is the only action we should take. It was Russia, case closed, without any evidence. So Corbyn comes out, takes a measured approach, and asks for evidence. And this is what he is faced with the next morning in the papers. Corbyn, the Kremlin stooge there on the left from the Daily Mail, they just are relentless in their attacks against him. Mutinous Labour MPs accuse him of appeasement for not condemning Putin. He wants Moscow to run own poison tests. His spin doctor suggests our spies can't be trusted. Putin's puppet there on the right in the sun. Corbyn refuses to blast Russia on spy attack. As we know, his measured approach would have been the correct approach, because now the evidence that the government said they had, it's come out that they didn't have at all. They've rushed to judgment. It's led to spies being ejected from countries all over Europe and Canada and America. In America have closed the Seattle consulate down. It's an absolute mess, and now they've dug themselves into a hole that there's no way they can get out of. The only thing that they can do is just dig their heels in. They can't do a U-turn on this. They just can't. It would be disastrous for them. So he was right in what he said in that. But it didn't stop with the newspapers. The BBC joined in as well. You can see this background. I'm sure you've seen it. This is the Newsnight background, making him look way more Russian there with Photoshop in front of the Kremlin. And even in the last couple of days, I found this.
Kay, the Labour leader, accused the Foreign Secretary of being too quick to blame Russia when he believed other explanations could emerge.
Boris Johnson seems to have completely exceeded.
So they've dug up an old film there of him playing with a child and playing with Russian dolls, because it was on Russia, the segment was. It was just, there's no need for it, there really isn't. And you can see they're being, I don't think they're even being subtle in what they do anymore. Especially if you look at what they did recently with regards to the reports of anti-Semitism in the Labour ranks. And I'll get to that in a minute, but there is some pockets of anti-Semitism in the Labour ranks. There is. There's a lot of anti-Semitism in the Conservative ranks as well. I would like to point that out. But Jeremy Corbyn has come out against it quite vehemently, and he's, over the past, 40 years, he's been probably the most outspoken voice against anti-Semitism there is, not just in the Labour Party, but in the government. He really has got a long track history of being friends of the Jewish people, really. And at one stage on Passover, coming back to the BBC, one stage on Passover, he decided that he was going to spend Passover with some Jewish friends. And we'll take a look at what the BBC did.
Jeremy Corbyn says he has no regrets about attending a Passover event last night organised by a left-wing Jewish group called Judas. It has argued that there's no problem with anti-Semitism in Labour.
It's a flat-out lie. A simple Google search can prove that is wrong. Judas have condemned any anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. It's just a flat-out lie on 6 p.m. on the BBC. But that's not where it ends, really, with the BBC on this, because they also were talking about a story in one segment. I think it was about the Sunday Times, and they led on it in one of their news reports, about some Labour members who were in Facebook groups with hundreds of thousands of people combined in these Facebook groups, where there was some anti-Semitism. The Labour members weren't doing it. They were probably in these Facebook groups, and there's no evidence that they posted anything in these Facebook groups at all, let alone anti-Semitic comments. But because other people within these groups, as you will know if you've been in any group anywhere on social media, there's always anti-Semitism. There probably will be in the comments below that I'll have to delete. But they led on it, and Owen Jones went on their show and taught them a new one, really, for even covering the story. Watch this.
This so-called journalism, okay? Where's your camera? This is Conservatives Against the EU. It's a Facebook group. It is full of the most despicable racism I've ever seen.
Presumably the Conservative Party would reject it.
About Gina Miller, for example, F off you foreigner, telling them to go back to your homeland.
Fine.
The most despicable racism. You're not making that. Why isn't that? Why is that?
Because presumably Labour is the story at the moment. But why is they not able to change the narrative?
That's the point.
I actually enjoyed that when I saw that. It was good to see Owen Jones pushing back on the BBC there for their constant bias. They are always criticising Corbyn when the government is a shambles at the moment. I mean, if anybody should be criticised at the moment, it's Theresa May and Boris Johnson, but hey, that's my opinion. There is something that you will notice that they don't criticise Jeremy Corbyn on ever, though, and it's something that never happened to Bernie Sanders, really. They don't criticise his policies. The reason they don't criticise their policies is because their policies are wildly popular. And Jeremy Corbyn is right. They're scared. And it's getting worse and worse, these smear jobs of him are. Which begs the question, why are they doing it? They must be totally petrified of Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister. So do they know that Theresa May is on her way out after this debacle of a Brexit that she's overseen, and the whole fiasco surrounding the Novichok poisoning? I don't know, but it seems really weird that they are really, it's getting worse and worse as the weeks go by, and they're trying to attack him and smear him any way they can. I think Jimmy's right. Going back to how I started this video, I think Jimmy Dore is right. They are not just the guard dogs of the establishment anymore, the press aren't, and especially the BBC. They are the attack dogs as well, and they're coming out and trying to attack Jeremy Corbyn. I'll leave some front pages up here. You'll have seen them go by of some of the other times he's been attacked over the last 6 or 7 weeks. It's just constant. It's a barrage. But they're scared. They must be. It must be the only reason why. They must be petrified of him getting in, because change will happen, and I hope it's sooner rather than later. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure you click subscribe, click the bell as well, otherwise you will not see any future videos. I can guarantee that. YouTube have admitted it. Please support me on Patreon if you can. I cannot keep doing this without your support. So if you enjoy the videos and you can spare $1, $2, $5, whatever you can a month, that would be great. And thanks very much for your continued support. And until next time, peace and take care.